our meetings with a question. And tonight's question, as usual, because we're staying with this topic, is what are you grateful for? And if you want to just put that in the chat. Oh, Crystal, your mom is here. How wonderful. Welcome, Crystal's mom. Um, so, Crystal's mom, what are you grateful for? Let's see if she'll answer. Okay. So I pick on somebody in the room. Agnes. Uh, oh,
I will be grateful if the wordly works tonight, unlike last time I tried to do this 3 times and it finally worked. So, could somebody try and look in the chat and see if you can actually hit the link and change the language, please?
Yeah, that's
so Agnes is grateful that Wordly is working. Anybody else want to chime in? You have yours on mute? There's some, oh, somebody was talking.
I'm grateful for the foster dog I'm fostering right now. He taught my resident dog how to play because my resident dog had a deprived childhood and didn't know how to play. And so, but now he's playing tug of war and they're wrestling. It's so cute to watch.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charlene. Anybody else? Oh, yeah.
I'm grateful it's great weather for biking.
It's very nice. Welcome. Come in. Welcome. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Napor from SVCE. I am grateful to be here in person. I really miss in-person meetings, so happy to be here tonight.
You have to reach that. You got to hold it like this.
Okay.
Did you guys hear on Zoom?
Okay, I'm going to go again, louder this time. I was just saying that I'm grateful for in-person meetings. We have a lot of Zoom meetings. I have Zoom fatigue. It's really nice to be here in the middle of community tonight.
I'm grateful for flowers in spring.
Not only am I grateful for flowers in spring, I'm also grateful for Zyrtec.
Oh, it's a beautiful drug. That was my first career. Yes, it is beautiful. I am grateful. My daughter is home from college, and we had a wonderful lunch today, so it was very nice. Anybody else want to share? No? Yes? Maybe? All right. Well, there's a hand on the Zoom. So just unmute yourself and speak, please.
Sure. Carter Lavin with the Trans Bay Coalition. I'm grateful to have gotten the invite to speak with you all today. Adina Levin, who's normally kind of our partner in the corner, passed on the invite because she can't make it. So it's nice to be with your crew. This is a great way to start a meeting.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So some of our announcements. One of the first announcements is Planning Commission is meeting on Monday at 6 o'clock for a study session on the Lakewood Village Center. So that's at 6 o'clock on Monday, the 12th, and that's Planning Commission. Are there any other announcements in the room before we do our formal announcements? Or on Zoom? No? Okay. So I will turn it over to our first formal announcement, and that's with Charlene Liu and Ari Fleischman. Did I pronounce Finesmith? What was I thinking? Sorry about that. They are both members of Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, Sunnyvale Safe Streets, and former commissioners of BPAC. And they're going to talk just briefly about Tasman and Hollenbeck. And I will turn that over to them. Thank you.
Yeah, Ari is remote.
Oh, what's your name?
I'm Daniel.
Daniel. Well, welcome, Daniel. And what's your name? Welcome. Okay, Ari, you're remote, so you're up.
Awesome. I think we have a
Thank you.
presentation. Is that up?
That were the links you sent me. And I need to share my screen. Oops. Who's my request person?
Can you make it full screen? Hello?
Yeah, hold on a second. When I said share, it did not do that. I know. Fiddlesticks. Oh, wait a second. You'd think I was a rookie at this. I am. Okay. Who wants to help me? I can't get it on full screen. Okay.
If you can't make it full screen, I'm happy to just present as is.
You want me to hit slideshow? Not that one. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Awesome. Well, I'll get started then. Thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Ari Finesmith. In case we haven't met, I'm a longtime resident of Casa Amigos, and I work in the transportation industry. And I'm here to talk about Tasman Drive, specifically between Fair Oaks and Lawrence Expressway in northern Sunnyvale. Some of you may not know, but Tasman Drive in this section has no continuous sidewalk and no bike paths. And it's a real problem because my neighbors and I are trapped in our own neighborhood, essentially. We can't walk or bike safely out of Casa de Amigos. And it's very unpleasant for the people who do. It's really problematic for children, who obviously can't drive, or the elderly who want to be able to walk places, but they can't. And Tasman Drive is also very dangerous, and there are people who do try and walk and bike on this road. And I'm very worried about the future of this, simply because they often are walking in the gutter next to cars going at 40 miles per hour, and there's a lot of blind curves, and it's inevitably going to lead to an accident or a collision that could be deadly. Can you go to the next slide? Awesome. So the good news is that Tasman Drive is currently 2 lanes in each direction, but it only needs to be 1 lane in each direction. The traffic is it's a lot less than what the road is designed for. And so Sunnyvale has proposed replacing the outermost lanes with multi-use pathways. And this is absolutely phenomenal. It's going to improve safety for everyone. It's going to empower children and the elderly to walk and bike places, along with everyone in between. And it's going to connect people to the many destinations around the area, such as East Channel Creek Trail, many stores, parks, schools, bus stops, and light rail stations. And this project also supports city goals. You know, we have our climate goals, our safety goals, and our active transportation goals. And this helps with everything. And it also really helps with our sustaining our future population growth. As our population grows, we need to be looking for alternative ways for driving and helping getting people out of cars and into more sustainable and more efficient modes of transportation. And this is one of the ways we get there. So we need your help to make this happen. Please visit our website, you can either scan a QR code or I'll also drop it in the chat with where you can do a couple of things. First, sign our petition. It just takes a few seconds. Send an email to City Council showing your support for this project. And if you can, please show up to the BPAC meetings and City Council meetings. We have BPAC, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, is happening. They're reviewing this project on May 15th, and City Council will be making the final decision on July 1st. So if you can, please be at both meetings. I will be there, and I look forward to your support.
Now Charlene is going to talk.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charlene Liu, and I'm told if I attend this meeting that I continue to be a member of Livable Sunnyvale. So, so what I'm going to talk about is the Hollenbeck bike lane study. And once Angela gets the slides up, then we can begin. But maybe I'll just introduce myself while Angela's working on that. So I was on the BPAC. My term ended last year, and I have been passionate about bicycle advocacy for a few years. I've always liked biking since I was a kid, and I raised my children to bike everywhere. So they bike to school, they bike to the library, they bike to go swimming. And all in Sunnyvale. So we're pretty familiar with it, in addition to how children travel around in Sunnyvale by bike. So now here's the slide, the first slide. So Hollenbeck is a major north-south corridor in Sunnyvale. It's the continuation of Pastoria, and it goes from El Camino Real southward to Homestead Road, where it continues under the name of Stelling in Cupertino. So it's a major way to get to Cupertino, to get downtown, to get to Caltrain, to get across town. It currently doesn't have bike lanes. It is dangerous as a result. Bikes have to share the travel lane with cars, and this photo here shows a cyclist biking by a parked car in the middle of the travel lane, and there are cars stopped up behind him. Over 100 people risk their lives every day biking on Hollenbeck, and that number over 100 is from a staff bicycle count. And this schematic here shows the gray car, which is a parked car, and the green cyclist has to go around it, and then the orange car has to go around the cyclist because they don't want to go at 10 miles per hour. And they are illegally traveling in the oncoming traffic lane, risking a collision with the red car. This happens all the time, not the collision part, but the cars going around me. Every time I bike on Hollenbeck, they're going around me. Understandably, I think if I were driving, I might do that too, but it's against the law and it's dangerous. Okay, next slide, please. There are a lot of school children biking on Hollenbeck. So people say, well, school children don't bike on Hollenbeck, they just cross it. But in fact, there are 8 schools that Hollenbeck serves. The schools are right on Hollenbeck or going through the attendance areas of these schools. And I went out on just 2 separate occasions over just 15 minutes. I was able to snap these photos and others of children biking on Hollenbeck itself, not just crossing Hollenbeck, but on Hollenbeck because of where they live and where the school is. They need to bike on Hollenbeck. It's the only practical way to get to school. And some of them, a lot of them are biking on the sidewalk. And that's what I had told my children when they were little, on Hollenbeck, bike on the sidewalk, because that was the least dangerous way to get through Hollenbeck. But of course, biking on the sidewalk is also has its hazards. If you're biking against car traffic, then that risks people backing out of their driveway and possibly hitting you because they're not looking in your direction. Okay, the last slide. So the city has proposed buffered bike lanes as one of the solutions, and that is the best solution that the city has proposed out of the 3 solutions they chose. So this is actually considered a safe way. It has 3-foot buffer, which is a good, healthy buffer, and it's up to best practices. It has a 4-foot bikeable width for the bike lane, and then the 2-foot gutter, which is not bikeable. And this way, and getting rid of street parking. So getting rid of street parking makes space for this, and it also clears the line of sight for all road users. So your line of sight isn't blocked, and in fact, residents backing out of their driveway will have clearer line of sight as well, and it'll be safer for them to back out. So just like for the Tasman project, this Hollenbeck proposal supports population growth and city goals, in particular equity goals, sustainability goals, and transportation safety goals. And it removes the dangerous door zone from parked cars. That's very important. The door zone is extremely dangerous, and one of the alternatives that staff presented, which is alternative 2, has this dangerous door zone, and so it's almost just as dangerous as not doing anything. So we do not support the door zone method alternative. We support this, and yeah, and so please support this safe bikeway on Hollenbeck. It'll improve transportation for everybody. You can go to our Sunnyvale Safe Streets website to sign the petition, write an email to council, and attend the upcoming May 20th council meeting. That council meeting is a study session where they will be taking public input as well as staff input. Thanks.
So thank you, Charlene and Ari. So just to recap, Tasman is Thursday, May 15th at BPAC, and July 1st at City Council, and Hollenbeck is May 20th Council, and that's a study session. Is that 7 or 6? Oh, 5 p.m. Okay, thank you. 5 p.m. So thank you. Biking is important, and I know Charlene from years ago because we would bike to school together. So thank you. I appreciate your time and mostly your passion. I mean, we need people like you to keep us advocating for things that the city needs. And so thank you. We're going to move on to our next announcement, and that is from Carter Lavin, and also a transportation issue. And Carter's just going to update us a bit on what's going on in transit, not necessarily bikes and walking, but transit. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela. And thank you so much, everyone, for having me here with you. I'm Carter Lavin. I'm with the Trans Bay Coalition. We're grassroots transportation advocacy group. So transit, bikes, street safety, walking, basically getting around in any way without a car that we advocate in all 9 counties of the Bay Area. We, in fact, I think a few months ago did an event in Sunnyvale, things like that. And I'm here to talk with you all because right now, California has a $300 billion budget with a B, and that's being decided. Right now, our state reps say, well, what should we do with the money? And I assume, much like a lot of you, when we ask our state reps for funding for all sorts of things throughout the year, they say, we'd love to, but there's not the funding for it. Well, now is the time where they decide how much funding is there for the various things. So Trans Bay Coalition, as well as over 100, and I think now we're up to 120, 115 organizations throughout the state of California have gathered together to put forward this proposal asking for $2 billion in operations funding to go to transit systems throughout the state of California. So we're asking for not even crumbs, we're asking for a singular crumb of the $300 billion state budget. This is $2 billion, so less than 1%. But as many of you know, when we were talking about, just take Caltrain as an example, there was money for Caltrain to electrify, but there's not money to run Caltrain, the operations budget. So Caltrain is actually looking at pretty big budget service cuts if they don't get made financially whole. BART is looking at about 85% reduction in service, which is one of those numbers that's like, it's never good when you have to double check, is decimate reduced by 10% or reduced to 10%, but BART's like in a really rough stage. And VTA, as we've seen with the strikes, while VTA might be healthy on their balance sheet, healthy organizations don't have their workers going on strike demanding greater pay and better treatment. So it is very clear that the state of California is underfunding transit. And so we'd love to have your organization sign on to the coalition letter. We'd love, which I put in the chat, we'd love to have individuals write letters to their state reps, which in the chat, there's a link, you can click the button, send the letters there. About 4,000 people throughout California have written letters. And this is the time to get loud, because in about a week, we are expecting the governor to put out his updated proposal for the budget. And then there's basically a whole lot of like horse trading and political fighting and all this stuff. And then the budget gets set, and that's, the state decides how it's spending its $300 billion. So that's the short version. Happy to go into various longer versions, but you have a kind of a wide-ranging crowd here, so I figured I wouldn't talk so much at the start. And yeah, I'll take questions that folks have.
Hello, is this
Right.
working again? Yeah, I just had a quick question. The 2 billion would be statewide. Is there any information about how that would get split up between the different transit agencies?
Yes, so that is a great question. It's literally a $2 billion question. So the way that it most likely will work is there was this past law from a few years ago where we got $1 billion from the state, and that was also divvied up statewide. So we'll very likely use that same formula, unless there's some massive curveball where people decide to come up with their own stuff. It'll probably use that again. And that formula is based off of ridership, and it's based off of kind of community population. So, VTAs would do pretty decently. And it's also based off of, I forgot the phrase, it's like stated need. It's some Sacramento thing. And basically when the money gets allocated around transportation, like I think it's like unmet needs or something. And there's some communities, like I think it's Humboldt, for example, or Del Norte, they say, oh, we have no unmet transit needs. Therefore, we get to take all this transit money and put it into highways and roads. And so sometimes local governments kind of do some shenanigans around this, and they say that they don't have needs because if they say they don't have needs, they flex funding. This money, this $2 billion is just for transit operations. So it'll probably end up being, $800 million to Bay Area transit agencies, $800 million to Southern California, and then, the remainder throughout the state. But there's not yet a line where it's like VTA equals X amount, Caltrain equals Y amount. But it is one of those things where the transit agencies themselves, we are reminding them to like get a little bit louder, because not to fall down too much of a rabbit hole, but when VTA says, hey, everyone, we're fine financially, that moves them way in the back of the line on these things, which is, I know that the ATU has some feelings around that. It's they're in an interesting spot, but this would really help a lot of the Caltrain things as well.
So I have a question as
Mhm.
well. It seems over the years, I frequently heard that we need to fund operations for public transportation. Do you know why this keeps coming up as an issue?
Yes. Oh, this is great. So there is no standing fund for transit operations in California. So normally one reason why like normally there's programs and they say, oh, for this thing, for this need, here's this amount of money. And there's like this kind of, we in the state of California get X amount of money from all these different things, and it goes to all these different programs. There isn't that line existing. Sometimes they get some money from the cap and trade program, which we could talk all about how the cap and trade program needs to be re-upped and made a lot stronger and a lot bigger, so that there is money for that. But basically, we as a kind of transit advocates have to keep fighting for a seat at the table, because there's just never a part where the governor says, oh, okay, and now the money automatically goes out. Our hope is that eventually they say, cool, here's your $2 billion and you'll get $2 billion next year, please buzz off. And then we'll say, thanks. And then 3 years later, we might come back for more money. But like that's part of your point of, yeah, they haven't solved this problem. And so we have to keep getting loud.
Thank you for getting loud, and
Right.
thank you for your presentation. And we are very close to signing that letter. That's probably
Great.
just something we do later on tonight. So thank you also for your passion and your coming to speak to us tonight.
Of course,
Appreciate
always great to be here. Thanks, folks.
So our next presentation is about sustainability, and I think I'm probably preaching to the choir if I was going to ask who knows what CAP stands for. Yeah, pretty much everyone in the room. Does anybody not know what CAP stands for in the room? No? Chuck doesn't know what CAP stands for? CAP, C-A-P. Climate Action Playbook. So our two next speakers were previous and current members of the Sunnyvale Sustainability Commission, and they're going to introduce CAP to us. How it got started, why we needed it, and where it is starting to go now. So I have Doug Kunz, thank you, and Crystal Wickham. And I think Doug is first.
I am. And why don't we go ahead and get Crystal hooked up with the microphone, because she'll be following hot on my heels. All right, so just to kick us off tonight, we'd like to orient you to the basics of Sunnyvale's Climate Action Playbook, its history, and the basic conceptual framework that's just used to organize the actions that are being taken by the city. So presenting this section, as mentioned, are Crystal Wickham, who is a former chair of the Sustainability Commission, and myself. I'm also a former chair and still a current member. Next slide, please. There we go. All right, so just to start off with a brief history of the CAP. People who've been involved in the CAP's inception and evolution have included community members, as well as, of course, city staff, the Sustainability Commission, and the City Council. And it's really evolved, I'd say, over time from an effort that had more of a grassroots type of feel to an increasingly professionalized effort that's involving all city departments. First off, back in 2014, what was first passed was called the Climate Action Plan, sometimes colloquially called CAP 1.0. And in that case, it was written with significant input by volunteer citizen committee, and had lots of goals. And so it was known as being very difficult to track, because there was a lot of stuff that was easy to get lost in the weeds. But one thing I would definitely call out in terms of being a major achievement of CAP 1.0 was the founding of Silicon Valley Clean Energy. We'll be hearing from later. So then in 2019, the city kicked off an effort that was originally called CAP 2.0 and eventually became known as the Climate Action Playbook, which passed and also included a component called Next Moves 2023. The playbook had a clearer and more trackable structure, and set just at a high level a goal of 80% greenhouse gas emission reductions below 1990 levels by 2050. And there was, again, a lot of things that the city was undertaking in the climate action playbook. But one thing that I would definitely call out in terms of, if you think of one major thing that the climate action playbook achieved, it was the adoption of the city's REACH code that required all electric new construction. So like as we later on are looking at emissions in the city, one thing that you'll see is that even though our city population has been going up, that the emissions from buildings haven't necessarily been getting worse, even as we've been putting up a lot of new buildings. So then one part of the climate action playbook was an intention by the city that every 5 years or so we would be coming back and coming up with a work plan of basically what to do over the next 5 years. And so the first period of that ended it was originally scheduled to be 2022, but due to the pandemic, got delayed out to 2023. And then starting with 2023 through 2028, we're in our second period where we have that detailed plan. So that right now is called Game Plan 2028. And at the time that was passed, the playbook itself was also updated to reflect changes in state policy to change our goal, our long-term goal to 85% greenhouse gas emissions below 1990 levels by 2045. So that is deeper and sooner. Really a more ambitious target. There are a lot of major moves in the game plan, and I'm grossly oversimplifying, but some of the things that I would definitely call out are more aggressive action in terms of electrification of existing buildings, and then continued pushes for transportation decarbonization. And again, that's a gross oversimplification, but some high-level takeaways. And now I'll go ahead and hand off to Crystal to take us through a bit about how the CAP is organized.
All right, thank you. So I really want to draw attention to the interactive playbook, which is online at sunnyvaleclimateaction.org. And that is a super handy place to reference all of the things that we're talking about. But how is the CAP organized? So it's a playbook. It's kind of like a sports analogy. There are 6 different strategies. And then we go down to the next level. There's 19 different plays, and then there are moves. The current Game Plan 2028 has 66 moves. So we are not going to talk about all of them tonight. But this sunnyvaleclimateaction.org is the place to go to find out more about each of these things, as well as the actual scoreboard. So I am going to attempt to briefly go to this website and show you a couple of things, like the scoreboard. So it's a little hard to see here, but there it shows that in 1990, our emissions were about 1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And then in 2022, those emissions were down to 741,000. Which is 26% below what the 1990 levels were. And then it also shows where we want to get to. So by 2030, we want to get to 56% below, and by 2045, 85% below. So we are on the path, and but we still have lots of work to do. Then I also want to show the playbook strategies. So there are 6 strategies, as I mentioned on the slide. One is promoting clean electricity, and then all of these are links. So what is clean electricity? What are greenhouse gas emissions? How to promote 100% clean electricity? So all of these are where you can drill down and find out a lot more about this particular strategy. And then every one of these strategies also has be a part of the solution. So call to action, things that you can do to be part of promoting clean electricity. The second strategy is decarbonizing buildings. The third one is decarbonizing transportation plus sustainable land use. Then we also have the next 3 are managing resources sustainably, empowering our community, and adapting to a changing climate. So again, each one of these different strategies has drill downs and then a way that you can be part of the solution. I'm going to go back really quick to below the scoreboard. It has what the status of all of the individual moves. And so each one has a progress indicator. Is it complete or ongoing? Is it in progress? Is it delayed, not yet scheduled, or on hold? So again, moving down here, we've got the 6 strategies. Each one you can drill down to the different plays. So this particular strategy, decarbonizing transportation, has 4 different plays. And then for each one of the plays, you can drill down even further and see the moves. And this particular move is about parking strategies, and it is in progress. And the timeline is also shown here, like which of the years is it going to be worked on. So the timeline for this particular move is to be worked on in fiscal years 24 and 25. So I think I'll stop there, but you can see that there's a wealth of information here, and this is where you can go to find out the status of your favorite moves. And there's plenty of options because there's 66 of them. All right, end it off.
Thank you for that introduction to what CAP is. Now we have from city staff, Madeline Kerr, who's been with the city of Sunnyvale for 5 years in the Environmental Services Department, working on climate action. Her work is a balance of policy and data analysis, hosting community events and outreach like tonight. So we appreciate you coming to speak to us tonight. Oh, and you're a new mom. Congratulations. I'm so sorry to keep you up.
Oh, no.
You're welcome.
Thank
You. Do I have your slides or do you have your slides?
I have my slides. And then I also have Ramana Chinakotla joining me. He's the Director of Environmental Services. So Ramana, go ahead and say hi while I pull up my slides.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ramana Chinakotla. I'm the Environmental Services Director for the city. I just want to acknowledge Crystal and Doug. I mean, they've been a great ambassadors for us. They've been a part of our sustainability efforts from the beginning with all our climate action plans. And they not just support sustainability in the city, they live and breathe it every day. So thank you very much for all that you do. And Doug for still being on the commission and helping us out. But also, Environmental Services Department is the lead department for the city in implementing the climate action plan. Sustainability is actually led. The team is led by Madeline here, and we have a few other staff, a small team, but mighty, and they're very passionate about sustainability. And I think Madeline has her slides up, so I'm going to stop talking. And Madeline, go ahead.
All right, thank you. And thank you everyone for having us tonight. We really appreciate the chance to get to talk about this. Like Ramana said, we're all very passionate about it. So we love to be able to come and talk about it with other passionate people. So Crystal and Doug, thank you guys. You teed us off so well. As I said, we just adopted an update to our climate action playbook, as well as a new game plan with those 66 moves. I wanted to talk a bit more about our strategies for getting our to our 2030 target. So reducing our greenhouse gas emissions at 56%. The way that our playbook is structured, we have those big strategies like Crystal talked about, and then the plays, and she mentioned 19 plays. And so what I wanted to highlight here is that plays 1.1 down to 4.1 all have a very quantified metric or target associated with them. And so that's really the meat of how we are looking at achieving our greenhouse gas reduction goals. So for example, we have a play that's promoting 100% clean electricity. The target that we have for that is by 2030 that we have 100% participation in clean electricity. So we'll hear a little bit about Silicon Valley Clean Energy later. And they can talk about how we're going to get there. We have another goal about getting zero emission vehicles registered, increasing that number registered in Sunnyvale. And then we have a 2030 target of reaching 42% of all vehicles registered in Sunnyvale are all electric or zero emission. So Crystal showed you sunnyvaleclimateaction.org, our scoreboard. You can really dig into the data behind these and some more descriptions about different ways we can go about getting to these. But I just wanted to highlight that piece here. And so when we adopted Game Plan 2028, we hired Rincon as our consultant to support us with estimating our emissions reductions. So we crowdsourced, from the community, I want to say over 200 different ideas for like, what could we add in terms of a specific action into this new work plan that we're developing. And then we sifted through that and found like, okay, these were some really popular topics and they're kind of in line with each other. Sorted that down to, like 100 or so. And then we had staff really evaluate what was in line with current plans and programs or policies that we knew we wanted to implement. What were things that we thought were feasible that we could, definitely accomplish within the next year. And then we had stuff that was kind of like maybe a little infeasible or we didn't know much about. And so once we got, a solid list of ideas from our staff, we took that to the consultant and had them run the analysis. Okay, if we implemented this suite of moves, where would we get in terms of greenhouse gas reductions? And so we went back and forth with them, and what we ended up with was that list of 66 moves with a total emissions reductions of 412 metric tons of CO2 by 2030. So that actually gets us to 58% below our 1990 level. So we gave ourselves like a little 2% buffer there from our goal, which is great. And this is how those greenhouse gas reductions split up between our various plays. So play 1.1 is focusing on that clean electricity. So we get, 1% of that 412 metric tons of emissions is coming from that. Play 2.2 is existing building electrification, and we're getting a big 26% of our emissions that we project that we're going to reduce are going to come from the moves that are associated with play 2.2. So any moves that are kind of underneath that play within the game plan. 2.3 is electrification of new construction, and plays 3.1 and 3.2 focus on VMT reduction. So reducing the number of miles traveled by cars in Sunnyvale. And then play 3.3 is about converting those cars to zero emission. So we really are focusing a bit more on getting that zero emission in the next 5 years, getting those zero emission vehicles numbers increase in the next 5 years. And then, we have a focus on reducing VMT as well, but if we can shift everything to zero emission and then, reducing VMT is going to require a lot more regional collaboration. I've heard a lot about public transit tonight. That's a really sticky, big, complex topic for our whole region. And so we envision that being a longer term kind of goal and target that we're aiming at. Play 3.4 is focused on reducing off-road emissions. And so off-road emissions are things like your lawn and garden equipment or your construction equipment. So backhoes, things that aren't vehicles you see on the road, rather off-road is the term. Play 4.1 is where we have our zero waste goals. And so where the emission reductions we're assuming we will get there are from removing organics from our waste stream. So when you have food in your landfill that produces a lot of methane, which is a really potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. So really focusing on reducing that number. There's a lot of state regulations to do that, and so meeting and exceeding those is what we're looking at for that. Okay, so we just presented our 2023 greenhouse gas inventory. I think back in February. So I wanted to kind of use that as a frame to walk through where we're at and where we're heading. But before I did that, I wanted to talk a little bit about what a greenhouse gas inventory is. So I just talked to you about how we're looking to reduce emissions, but what are emissions, where are they coming from, and how are we measuring them? So greenhouse gases are tracked via scope, and scope really looks at okay, what's happening within your city limits? So that's called in boundary. So on the screen, you can see scope 1 emissions are, stationary fuel is like, okay, what's the building, natural gas the building's using, agriculture, any emissions you get from that, any industry that exists within your city, any travel that occurs within your city, and then waste that is in the city. So that's just really about your city boundaries. Scope 2 is grid supplied energy. And so that's there's a lot of crossing and it's a little harder to quantify, okay, how much of that is attributed to Sunnyvale and not. So we do look at grid supplied energy to an extent. And then scope 3 is much more out of bounds. So when you think of scope 3, think of like when I purchase my shoe, how much greenhouse gas emissions are associated with my shoe, like the whole supply chain of my shoe. All that supply chain would be considered scope 3 because none of that's happening within Sunnyvale theoretically. So our inventory focuses on scopes 1 and 2, and a lot of that has to do with scope 3 being very hard to calculate, as well as when you're doing a community-wide inventory and you're looking at a city, really wanting to focus on the activity within that city and kind of what's within control of that city. And so when you talk about scope 3, that's much more getting Nike to change their manufacturing processes or something. That's like a lot bigger scope than what we're really focused on for a city climate action plan. We've got the greenhouse gases up there. So the ones that we track are carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and my screen is blocking the last one, but I think that's methane. How we do this is we follow a greenhouse gas protocol. So there's a greenhouse gas protocol for community-wide greenhouse gas inventories that was developed with ICLEI and the World Resource Institute. And so it's a standard that cities can follow, but it is not required, and greenhouse gas inventories aren't a required piece of a city's scope of work. So we do one because we have a climate action plan and we have a community who's passionate about this topic, but it's not required. And so there's not, because it's not required, there's not a very standardized way to go about doing this. So we follow this protocol, and as you're collecting data and as you're going through this process, I just want to highlight there's a lot of assumptions that go into this. So there's a lot of calculating activity within the city. Like transportation is a great one that we can talk about later, but knowing how many miles are traveled within the city, how many start within the city and end elsewhere, how those miles are traveled, in what type of vehicle, what the fuel efficiency of it is, things like that. It can get really complex to try and actually track all of that. And so we use our greenhouse gas inventory as a guide for us and as a baseline for us to improve on, but we also track activity data kind of separate from the inventory and alongside it to make sure to understand the better picture of how we're implementing actions within our playbook, and where we might not be seeing the reductions in our inventory necessarily, but that doesn't mean that they're not actually happening in the real world. So I'll give some examples of that later. So emissions by year, this is what the results of our inventories look like. So the vertical bars going across are the actual emissions, and then the horizontal lines that we have are our past and future goals and targets. So we had a baseline of the 1990 levels. We wanted to achieve that by 2020. Thanks to SVCE, we were well ahead of that. The state has a 2030 target that's a bit higher than Sunnyvale's, and so Sunnyvale did set a more ambitious 2030 target, really with the idea that we had to get a lot further in that interim if we had any chance of reaching those carbon neutrality targets, which they change. They've already changed since our 2019 adoption. So I think that we were had a good idea there in setting that ambitious interim target. So where we were at pre-pandemic was at 25% below 1990 levels. After the pandemic, that's where you see that dip to the 41, and then where we're at today is about 24. So we're right back close to where we started pre-pandemic at this point. Where our emissions come from, largely from the transportation sector. So we're looking at about 50% there, and then close to 25% from natural gas use. And so when I was sharing the strategy for how we're reducing, where all of the emissions reductions in the next 5 years are coming from, you can see that they were really focused on building electrification and transportation emissions. And so that's reflected, in how we see the emissions that we generate. A caveat for the natural gas emissions right now is just that we are assuming that split of residential and commercial, but we're not always able to get that level of granularity in the data. And so this is another, another one of these instances where we do an inventory. We hope we have a good idea of where we're at, but sometimes the data can be hard to obtain. Off-road equipment's been a sector that's grown a bit. And so when we adopted our game plan 2028, we actually added that as a metric. So that was the new metric that we added for the current plan. So this is basically a look at the pie chart over the years. So you can see how transportation's changed over the years, how commercial and residential natural gas have changed, and then how electricity has. Doug talked about the adoption of SVCE being the really big thing that came out of CAP 1.0, and you can see that really reflected in our electricity emissions over time here. Commercial natural gas use has increased quite a bit, but so has square footage of commercial space. And so while we've seen that number get a lot higher, the energy use per square foot doesn't match that exactly. So like for example, this last year, I think we only had 0.5% increase in the energy intensity like per square foot of commercial space. On the transportation side, you can see, so that was where the COVID impacts really hit us. But when COVID happened, there was a big dip in transportation emissions. Now what we're seeing is they're still a little below pre-pandemic levels, and I'll get a little bit more into that data here in a sec. Solid waste is maintained fairly steady, but slowly decreasing over time. And then off-road, there's been quite a bit of variability, but that is a sector that I would say has the most variable like data and methodology. So the methodology updates there kind of impact the way that that's measured year to year. So it's not always apples to apples when we're looking at that data. So transportation, what we do is we have a modeled vehicle miles traveled number. So our vehicle miles traveled number is an assumption of this is how many miles people are traveling based on population and job growth. So it's not really representative of actual activity in Sunnyvale. What we do is we receive information from California Air Resource Board on the number of miles traveled per different types of vehicles, as well as the fuel efficiency of vehicles. And then we also have, the number of electric vehicles that are on the road. So while we have a modeled VMT, we apply the actual activity data for gas use, natural gas use, diesel use, things like that. So we saw VMT continuing to increase as modeled. However, emissions weren't quite increasing with those because we were becoming a lot more efficient with how we were traveling those miles. And then what we did in 2020 was the Metropolitan Transportation Commission used some activity, data like tolls and different activity data that they had access to kind of assume a % reduction from impacts of COVID. So people just working from home, not traveling, not going to school, all of that. And that's how we got that dip. So we just applied that to our modeled VMT number. They gave us a factor every year up until I think this was the last year that we're applying any factor because it was basically negligible in 2023. So that's a look at transportation emissions. So when we talk about our targets for Game Plan 2028, what we're really looking at is going zero emission with that, because VMT is really hard to track how people are traveling, getting them into transit. That can be really tricky. And so really just focusing on reducing the emissions associated with cars to begin with is the main focus there. How we're doing on that goal, we have a really ambitious target of 42%. We do see, good growth every year, but we need to see this start to really exponentially grow. So we're at about 11%, which is fairly high. We're definitely one of the higher ones in the state in terms of adoption of EVs. And so we're currently working on plans for getting charging more widespread throughout Sunnyvale and really looking at how to partner with, multifamily and commercial to help expand that infrastructure. So that way people have places to charge if they are choosing to purchase an EV. Okay, so moving on to electricity, we talked about SVCE's adoption, and so you can really see that here. The light blue and light purple lines are the emissions, and the dark blue and dark purple are the actual electricity consumed, units of electricity consumed. So blue is commercial and purple is residential. Commercial consumes the most, and we've seen, emissions really come down for both of these sectors. We've got still a little bit coming in from commercial, and their use dipped down and it's gone back up a little, but not as much. So I think Doug mentioned, with the growth that we've seen in Sunnyvale, this electricity usage we're just really being efficient with our space here. And so this is our percent of electricity from a carbon-free source. We have that caveat year where PG&E claimed to be 100% carbon-free, so we reached 100% that year. And now we're really close to that 100, and there's just a little bit of work to do to get a handful of accounts switched and just make sure that there's more clean electricity available for SVCE and PG&E to obtain, so their portfolios are cleaner. Okay, so off-road emissions look at categories like construction and mining, industrial, lawn and garden, like I talked about. And we do get activity data from the state to calculate this, total fuel consumption, and an emissions factor per the fuel use. And so that's how we calculate that number. And this is what it looks like based on these different categories. So this is a fairly new data set available to us. I think there was some questions about what might constitute industrial and construction and mining and lawn and garden. And we still have a little bit of sorting out to do with the Air Resource Board to understand that better. So this was something that updated right in time for our game plan 2028 projections, and we'll work to better understand each of these sectors. But lawn and garden is a pretty small portion of this. Industrial and construction and mining are a bit bigger, as well as our light commercial. Okay, and that was it for myself, and I think we're gonna go to Nupur. Wasn't sure if we wanted to take questions now or wait until.
I think maybe we'll take some questions before Nupur.
Yeah, I have a question about measuring VMT. It seems like there's a lot of different options actually to really directly measure that. You've got streetlight data, like kind of stuff, big data with how fast cell phones move. But another one, has anyone worked on, I know we want to start charging people for the actual miles they travel their cars. If we change the registration to be just report your mileage, then we instantly have instant metrics about how far people in a city are traveling of all the vehicles registered in the city. Is that an option for doing vehicles miles traveled, and has that been come up anywhere that you know?
I'm not sure if that's come up, and I'm not sure if that's something that we're looking at. I think there's how we measure VMT is fairly new at the state level in terms of its requirements for when you're developing, and the kind of impacts. It used to be level of service, now it's VMT. So there's a few different factors that go into why we choose that methodology. And so I think for us, it's a matter of understanding, okay, if this is how the city's tracking VMT for whatever reasons that are there different things we can look at, such as if that was to happen, then okay, is that data available through the DMV? Things like you said, streetlights. I think the other one is Google Insights. Google has like an environmental insights tool where we can kind of see, they're tracking it based on, phone activity and things like that, how people move through the city. So they have some estimates. It's a really new tool. So we and a couple other cities have talked about, okay, how like reliable is this? What are they using? It could be something that we supplement our inventory with, and then later down the line look at using. But the way that the protocol is and how we're currently set up, you're using our model number. Definitely keeping an eye on those emerging alternative data sources.
Thanks. And I was also wondering about tracking vehicle use, and this is just an idea I have. I don't know whether, I'm pretty sure it's probably not a standard, or maybe there is a standard. I don't know. I'm wondering whether tracking the number and kind of vehicles that people own in the city would help. I think that would be a good number to keep track of. So even though it doesn't directly track VMT, it does track how many vehicles that people have, and how many vehicles people have is correlated with VMT. It also is a big imposition on street parking use, which is a very difficult factor when looking for extra street space to put in a bike lane. So for that reason, that's also just clearing off street space for bike lanes by discouraging people from owning so many cars is a benefit in itself. So I was wondering if there's any effort to do something like that, or if other jurisdictions have done anything like that.
We do track the number of vehicles registered in Sunnyvale. We can see, I think we can see them by fuel type only. I'll have to double check that. So that would be what something we could do is track, population and population to car ratio over time and kind of look at how that's changed. So we have both of those data sources tracked and we could take a look at that. I want to say we did maybe 3 or 4 years ago and didn't see anything super like not nothing with a trend necessarily. But that is data we can't track.
Hi. So I had a question. You mentioned, I think earlier, something about kind of tracking the inputs or kind of tracking in like, if someone that lives in Sunnyvale buys something, like tracking those emissions, in the manufacturing of that item. Can you clarify that? I think I didn't fully understand how that works.
Are you talking about like the scopes of it when I was talking about scopes for, yeah.
Yeah, could you explain like how what you're tracking in terms of things that are not taking place in Sunnyvale but are, coming into Sunnyvale, like how you're accounting for that?
Yeah. So, for example, for like energy, we track all energy use within of a building within Sunnyvale. So that's very like within Sunnyvale. Um, when we get our like emissions factor for that electricity use or energy use, sometimes there in the factor there can be they can account for emissions associated with the transportation. Like if electricity is going across a line, sometimes there's energy loss there. So there could be emissions associated with that, or same thing with natural gas going through a pipeline. There could be leaks and emissions associated with that. So that in boundary or that scope 2 is kind of tracking anything that might be associated with the energy use that we use just within our city. For transportation, for example, we track everything that like any a trip that starts and ends in Sunnyvale, we account all of the emissions associated with that trip to Sunnyvale. Anything that starts in Sunnyvale and ends elsewhere, or starts elsewhere and ends in Sunnyvale, we account for 50% of those emissions. And that's pretty standard across, and that's to help make sure that cities aren't double counting emissions or accidentally not counting emissions on both sides. So that way we're trying to make sure that when Sunnyvale does their emissions inventory, it's kind of comparable or compatible with other inventories around the region. Solid waste is all the solid waste that we generate within our city, but we don't track anything post waste stream. And we don't track emissions associated with the products that you're using that are then becoming waste. We only track the emissions associated with the waste itself.
Okay, so
Does
you're
that kind
not,
of clarify?
yeah, that does. So you're not tracking, for example, like the emissions associated with producing an EV, like producing the battery packs for an EV.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And that's just because it's a really complex supply chain. Transparency is really hard right now. There's just not transparency within supply chain, so it can be really it would be very, very modeled numbers with a lot of assumptions. I think that you might be able to find articles here and there that have some estimates of what it might be, a GHG associated with an EV or things like that. And then because we don't have any real purview over the supply chain. We can't do much from a city perspective in terms of influencing that. We don't focus on that as much. For the inventory, we're really focusing on like, things we can measure and control within the city limits for the most part.
Right, but we can control the what we promote in terms of supporting EV ownership, right? Because if we get to 100% renewable energy, then those EVs are on paper as efficient as walking or cycling or taking a bus, right? But the reality of that is not it. So I think we should at least have that caveat of saying, these are the estimates of EVs, and maybe that can influence what our priorities are in terms of what we promote, what we, provide funding to in terms of subsidies or focusing on, let's say, for example, bike parking over EV charging, right? Because we actually can do the math and say, well, this will actually have a bigger impact even if we can't measure it directly or we can't allocate it to Sunnyvale directly.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Hi, one more thing that I think we could measure, because we should have a way to calculate it, just based on looking at Google Map satellite view, how much pavement we have. That takes a lot of greenhouse gases to create the pavement and to maintain the pavement, including, and then concrete also. That's another one that we should be able to measure. Are we including those measurements in our climate model?
We are not. We are not including measurements from the pavement itself. You're right.
That one
And that, similarly, we only capture parts of construction. So we capture like the equipment use in Sunnyvale to construct a building, but we're not capturing like the emissions associated with the building materials or anything like that. So pavement, I think, would be a gap for us.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, Mike.
Okay, thanks. So this the playbook seems very aspirational. It's what we all want to see happen, but in certainly in this area in climate and things we do with housing and so on, it's important that we look at what we're actually accomplishing or how effective the plans are. And I mean, just looking at the data you showed, which is, I guess, a couple of years back, if you look at the trends, I mean, just intuitively, it looks like there's zero chance we're going to hit any of these targets unless a miracle happens in the next few months. So, and my concern is that if we are pursuing plans that are not realistic, it diverts us from taking actions or decisions that that will address the problem. How do we deal with that? Just like increasing the EVs, and unless we have a lot of chargers in multifamily homes, then that's just not going to happen. I mean, every time I talk to someone who's in an apartment about EVs, they just say, well, it's not practical. I can't charge it. So things like that. I mean, what can we do to get a plan that is realistic or achievable or that will actually reduce greenhouse gases?
I mean, I would say we tried to make this fairly achievable. So when we adopted this plan, we did so, collaboratively across the city. We had them identify if staff was needed, if resources and funding was needed, things like that. So we know which moves are going to be really important to reducing those greenhouse gas emissions, and got appropriate staff and resources assigned to those as much as we could predict we would need. And without having this plan where we thought through really a lot of different options. Okay, these are a few different pathways you could go for reaching this ambitious target in 2030. We really took the time to think through which one was the best for Sunnyvale, what was, like I said, most in line with programs and policies we already had in motion, where momentum maybe already was, or where we thought the community would be best aligned with. So it was intentional, and we are hoping it will be achievable. And I think that, keeping that focus on the really big ticket items is the biggest thing. So really building electrification, we've got a handful of moves we know are really important for that, focusing on getting EV infrastructure out there. And our plan is in line with the state's So California Air Resource Board has a scoping plan to get California to its greenhouse gas targets, and we're very in line with that. So we're anticipated to be supported by state funding, supported by state policy and state programs and things like that. So, you know, we're doing our best. It's all aligned and hopefully achievable. So I'll let Ramana add to that if he wants.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. That's a really good question. Looking at the data, it can be a little challenging. One aspect of why the data looks that way is also because we've been kind of spoiled because of the pandemic. We had a huge decrease in our VMT during the pandemic. So if you look at 2020 as a base, you look like you're on an incline going up. So that's one aspect of it. But there is, if you look at the amount of EV adoption that's been happening over the last few years, the trend is unmistakable. And in many cases, what happens is at some point it becomes mainstream, and it just, it's a matter of time before, everyone starts using EVs. Um, the there is a huge recognition on our side that we do need to do a lot of work on chargers. We have to install a lot of chargers in the city. Our goal is to install about 3,000 chargers. That's what we calculated that we would need to blanket the city. So even if you didn't have a charger inside the apartment, you would have something close enough that you could walk to. Your neighborhood store, your neighborhood retail. There's your office that you go to, place of work that would have chargers. So those are the kinds of things that we're targeting. We're also targeting partnerships with between SVCE and us, and some of the retail complexes and multifamily apartments. How can we leverage all of these, give them incentives to get more chargers in there? So we are working towards that, but sometimes progress happens in kind of leaps and bounds and spurts. So you won't see it in the data for some time, and then suddenly you'll see a big jump. So that's kind of how I would characterize it. But we are focusing on things that would move the needle the most. One is the EV chargers. The other one, like Madeline said, is building electrification. And if you see the trends there, a lot of people are now, when they replace their space heater, when they replace their, heating and cooling stuff, they are going for heat pumps. And that's going to make a big difference. Again, 5 years ago, no one knew what heat pumps were. If you asked a contractor, they would say, no, I can't do that. You need some specialized knowledge. In 5 years, now heat pumps are becoming very common. A lot of contractors know how to install heat pumps. So it's becoming mainstream. So again, it'll take time, but at one point it'll become a huge, you'll see a big spurt in the usage. So again, that can make a really big difference. So we are talking about between us and SVCE. SVCE has rebates for heat pumps and also for getting their electric service upgraded to take the additional load. And we are looking at piggybacking on them and then adding a topper, another incentive on top of that, to make it even more attractive. So we are focusing on the right things, but it takes time to get those results. So that's kind of how I would characterize it.
All right. I had a couple of questions. I'll just start with one and then pass it on. Related to what you were just talking about kind of like EV chargers and some of the other big ticket items, are these currently funded right now? Or is there work that needs to be done to get things funded? And actually, kind of maybe the broader question is, the city's budget process is starting in the next month. It was going to go through the budget in the next month or so. What are the kind of biggest items that the city should fund that would be beneficial to advocate for during that process that would reduce emissions?
So we have a projects budget for implementation of the climate action plan playbook, and yes, like we have funding to support building electrification, to support installation of EVI. to the extent possible. We don't have, for example, finding the funding to really like build out a large incentive program. We haven't fully funded that. So there's pieces that are funded and pieces that we haven't funded, and we're trying to understand how best to fund. In terms of advocacy to council through the budget process, I mean, our operating and projects budgets are pretty set already. It's always, you know, great to have support for sustainability projects. The Sustainability Commission does a review of the budget and kind of calls out specific projects or areas where they want to see more funding, or they want funding to be reconsidered. We have a study issue that we're getting ready to wrap up that's specifically focused on budgeting through a climate lens. So it's called climate budgeting. And so we'll be presenting those results to council later this year, and hopefully getting a little bit more guidance on how to really make sure we've got like that climate lens for every kind of look at a project budget specifically.
If I can also add, you know, our council has been amazingly supportive of everything that we've asked for. So when we adopted the last Game Plan 2028, which is our 5-year work plan, that is fully funded. You know, the things that we were planning to do, and we also got additional resources, both not just in environmental services, but also for public works, to push active transportation projects. The pieces that you're talking about, for example, do we have enough funding to do, you know, to install EV chargers, right? The way we are approaching that is, first we need to have a proper strategy on how we would attack it. And once we have that strategy, then we would go to council and say, hey, we have 3 partnerships right now lined up with, you know, ChargePoint and EVgo and these 3 apartment complexes, and it would cost us X amount of dollars to basically execute this partnership. We need that money. That's when we would go and ask them for money. So it is following a logical path. Right now we have money for studies and analysis, and when we actually have a project, we would go and ask them money for that project or a program, basically. So
I have a question. Is the city considering providing rebates to homeowners for going all electric, or any kind of, I know that SCV, I never say that right. I know they have great rebates because I availed myself of them last year, but I'm wondering, would the city also consider providing some kind of financial rebate to people that are to homes that are all electric?
Yes, that's something that we're considering as part of our approach to this.
Okay, one last one, and going back to Mike Cerrone's point, the data looks really bleak, and our city actually is doing a great job of doing as much as they can. Our state is actually doing pretty well, but wow, the numbers are not lining up very well. And like I personally I've pushed if everyone did what I was doing, we'd be there already, because I bike everywhere. I try not to drive anywhere, and I've got a completely electric house, and I've gone zero waste. But trying to get all those other people to do that is really hard, which is why Livable Sunnyvale is so important to make. We need more groups like Livable Sunnyvale really pushing this and getting people to change. It's a matter of political will, and we don't have it yet to get there fast enough.
Thank you, Madeline, for stepping up at the last minute. I know Christina was supposed to be here, so we appreciate your time. Napor is going to give us maybe some hopeful things that Silicon Valley Clean Energy is doing. So Napor Hirma is the manager of decarbonization programs at Silicon Valley Clean Energy. She leads transportation and building electrification programs to enable residents in Santa Clara County to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And before this, she had this role. She was in the city for 7 years as the environmental programs manager there. So welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Really happy to be here tonight. I'm gonna have to give Madeline a hard time later for getting everyone worried about climate change, but hopefully you will walk away with a more hopeful message. And then Agnes, I wanted to point out that my daughter says I work at CVS. So whatever acronym you came up with was probably better. Um, anyway, I am mostly. Oh, would you be able to pull my slides up? Okay, thank you so much. Just for those who are unfamiliar with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, we are your local community choice aggregator. That basically means the city of Sunnyvale, along with 12 other jurisdictions in our county, have control of your electricity supply, and that is through our organization. My fun fact that I like to share every time I present in Sunnyvale is that SVCE came out of a Sustainability Commission sponsored study issue back in the day. So we have our roots in Sunnyvale. Our office is in Sunnyvale, and this is a key city that we work with all the time. Today, I'm mostly going to focus on residential electrification programs. I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. Next slide, please. So as I said, we serve 13 cities in Santa Clara County. We have about 275,000 customers. Essentially, we serve all the cities except San Jose, Santa Clara, and Palo Alto. We have a 96% participation rate. Madeline referred to this earlier. We are trying to get that to 100%, but we do still allow customers a choice, so they can stay with PG&E and get their electricity from PG&E if they wish to. And we have $130 million committed to customer programs. Yes, that's $1 million. I think one of the topics that Angela had wanted me to touch on was also our funding source. All of that 130 million is from SVCE's revenues. So that's from the sale of electricity to our local community, and any profit we make is not really profit for us. We reinvest that back in the community in the form of programs that we offer our customers. So we are largely unaffected by some of the federal funding cuts that you have probably all heard of. But I will touch on at the end about a couple of ways that we could be affected moving forward. So building electrification, we've really found, next slide, we've found that we have been pushing electrification or switching away from fossil fuels for last 5 years, as long as the agency has been around. But we really have reached largely the early adopters, so the people that want to make changes to reduce their own greenhouse gas emissions in their home. But the typical residential customer isn't necessarily motivated by that. They're either unaware or not interested. They might be financially strapped. They don't know where to start. And in the case of water heaters in particular, when your water heater breaks down, you just want a quick solution because you want your hot water back. So at the end of the day, you're like that baby in the bathtub. You just want your hot water, right? And so how do we, as SVCE, reinvesting back in our community, get to a state where you have that happy baby in a bathtub of warm water? Next slide. So what we're trying to do through our programs is really meet people where they're at. Everybody has a different ability to pay for electrification. Electrification does cost more than using a gas appliance, so switching to an electric appliance is a higher cost. And some programs might work for one customer, but they may not work for another customer. So on the x-axis here, you have the difficulty of paying for electrification, and on the y-axis, you have how much support SVCE can provide. So you'll see we have our home rebates program, which is the earliest program that we launched, where we give you a rebate for switching away from a gas appliance to an all-electric appliance that runs on clean electricity. We now have a new program called Assisted Home Upgrades, which gives you a little more support and helps you to take not only SVC's incentive, but other incentives that are out there, and also connect with contractors who can help you make your upgrade. So one step up from that is our on-bill financing, which hasn't yet launched, but will towards the end of this month, which provides, again, financing to help homeowners make those upgrades. And again, that's financing on top of the rebate that we're already offering. And then we have the full service home upgrades program, which really goes all out. And so for a low income customer who has high difficulty of paying for their electrification project, SVC covers the entire cost of that project through that program. And then as a wraparound program, we have our Go Electric Advisor, which really spans the gamut of people having really simple questions or really complicated questions about electrification. So I'm going to walk through most of these programs now. Our Go Electric Advisor is an online website, chat, and phone helpline that anybody in our service territory can call to ask a question. The reason we started out working on this was because, next slide, we had a lot of questions that we would get from customers, from something as simple as, what is electrification, to I'm planning a remodel, who do I talk to, or what kind of rebate can I use? And so because we were getting all these questions, we thought it would be great to have a service that customers can leverage. Next slide. So now this service helps customers answer general questions. It also provides very deep technical assistance if you have a specific question about where to put a water heater in your home. It helps you understand what different rebates are out there. And then you can also, for customers who are really trying to plan ahead, you can get a customized electrification plan for your home. So let's say you're only doing one upgrade today, you're switching out your gas water heater for a heat pump water heater, but you're like, hey, you know, when my furnace breaks down, I want to put in a heat pump HVAC system. And so the service will help you cost that out, will help you identify what model, what size, et cetera. And so you're future-proofed when that furnace conks out, you have a ready answer to go to. Of the 1,000 or so contacts that we have had in the time that the service has been around, which is about a year, we have a really good customer rating, and about 75% of customers who have engaged with this say that they feel better about going electric after they have called. Next slide. And so next up is our home rebates program. These rebates that we're offering, some of you might have already taken advantage of, but they're for heat pumps, both water heaters and HVAC systems, and induction cooktop, or pre-wiring. So if you're planning ahead and want to wire your home for future electrification, you could do that. In the time that we've been running this program, which is about 5 years, we have paid out $5.6 million in incentives. So that's how popular this program has been. 4 million of that has just been in the last year. So you heard Ramana talk earlier about how contractors now know what a heat pump is and they're aware of how to install a heat pump. We are starting to see that upward tick in the adoption through our rebate program. We have crossed 1,000 heat pump water heaters and 1,000 heat pump HVAC units as of last year. And we have about 60 induction cooktops because that incentive is a little bit newer. Well, we're starting to see, we're starting to get into the 1,000+ installs. What we really need to get to is tens of thousands in the short term here. We've learned a lot of things while going through this program. Next slide. One of the things we've learned is that HVAC systems are wildly popular. Even though our water heater rebate was around for longer, the HVAC rebates have really taken over in terms of number of installs. And this could be because people are seeing warmer temperatures, they're wanting the air conditioning, and a heat pump, nicely enough, can do both. It can heat and cool your home. So you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 when you're swapping out your gas furnace and adding a heat pump. You also get the air conditioning capacity with that. Next slide. We also know through our rebate program that there are the electrical panels in a home don't always have to be upgraded. Back when we started this program in 2019, almost every customer that was installing a water heater or a heat pump HVAC also had to upgrade their panel from 100 amp to a 200 amp because they didn't have enough electrical capacity. But we are finding that you can work with an 100 amp panel. And that's huge because a panel can cost up to $7,000 for a customer, and SVC's rebate is only about $1,000. So you're still paying a lot of money, and if you don't have to pay that money, that's a lot of money you're saving. So we found that only 20% of the time or less, you actually need a panel upgrade. Next slide. And then another thing we've learned from those contractors that Ramana mentioned earlier is that they can actually do these upgrades pretty quickly. So 5 years ago, there were rumors about how switching from gas to a heat pump would take 5-6 days. And now contractors are telling us, hey, we can do this within 1 day for a water heater and less than 3 days for an HVAC system. And that's really fast. And that's very comparable to how you would switch out from a gas to a gas in both of those cases. Assisted home upgrades is one of our newest programs. What this program really helps you do is kind of parse all the different rebates that are out there. So the average customer is faced with a sea of rebate options that looks like these Waldos. You can't really distinguish between them. They all sound the same. And they come from different places. So you're applying, to state of California for one rebate, you're applying to SVCE for one rebate, and elsewhere. And so even motivated customers, even customers who are environmentally minded, cannot always figure out what to do. And so now we have, next slide, a partnership with a new startup called RockRabbit. And what RockRabbit is an AI-powered app that you can use on your phone or computer, and it helps you stack multiple rebates for one appliance or multiple appliances. It also helps you connect with a pool of contractors who have some experience with electrification. And so through this process, customers will really be able to get these installations quickly and conveniently because they can leverage multiple rebates and pay the lowest possible cost out of pocket. Next slide. Next program is called Full Service Home Upgrades. It is our first, what we call our direct install program. So the two programs that I mentioned so far really allow a homeowner to choose whoever they want to work with by way of a contractor. This program actually provides SVCE hired contractors. So you can use an SVCE contractor to come into your home and make an electrification upgrade. It really covers the full scope from coming in and assessing what type of system you need to change to, all the way through installation and also getting those rebates that are fairly complicated, as I mentioned. This is free for low-income customers, and there's a copay for market rate customers. We also have, as a part of this program, an emergency water heater replacement plan, which is we will replace your water heater and restore hot water within 48 hours, and it'll be a heat pump rather than a gas system. This program offers, next slide, this program offers very similar to our rebate program, covers a variety of appliances. The other nice part about this program is we already have our pricing posted online. So you don't have to go to a contractor. You can just use our pricing and our contractors. It's all there. And if there's a deviation from that pricing, you will know that ahead of time if it's a very complicated project. But for the most part, you have access to that pricing even before you've signed on anything, which was the whole point of making this transparent. Next slide. I won't walk through the entire customer journey here, but essentially this program, like I said, provides an SVC hired contractor. Contractor comes in, makes the upgrade in your home, applies for the rebates on your behalf so that the cost that you are paying is only the total cost minus the rebates. So you're only paying the difference. And you don't have to worry about the rebates at all. Next slide. Our emergency water heater program also works in the same way. There's a 24-hour emergency hotline, and you can call that and get a contractor to come out and give you a quote. And within 48 hours, they should either be able to switch you from a gas to a heat pump water heater, or they would put in a temporary loaner gas water heater so that you at least have the hot water, and then come back and do the additional electrical work if there is anything needed, to go to a heat pump. But our contractors have told us that in most of the cases, they believe they can go directly from gas to heat pump water heater. This program is paused for a moment because we were ironing out some kinks, but it should be live again, hopefully by the end of May. Next slide. This next program is our zero interest financing. I called it on-bill financing earlier. This program is going to go live at the end of the month. It essentially works like our direct install program that I just described, except this is a pilot that only involves moderate income customers who have high energy bills. And so we are doing this with a limited set of people. And the idea here is that this program is not free. The customer is still paying out of their pocket the cost of the project minus the rebates, but they're paying that on their energy bill. And the way that we have scaled the charge on that bill, it'll actually be less than whatever savings they're achieving from the energy efficiency of that project. So at worst, they won't pay anything. And at best, they'll actually get some savings on their utility bill from actually electrifying. So we're going to run this pilot for about a year, and if it is scalable, then it would be a viable mechanism for moderate income customers to get financing. Next slide. I'll touch briefly on our transportation electrification programs. Most of our efforts to date have been focused on EV infrastructure. So the idea was, if you build the infrastructure, the cars will come. Mike talked earlier about multifamily properties. That has been the main focus of our work at SVCE. That has been where most of our investments have been. So our two main programs for multifamily properties are that we provide technical assistance to help them plan out which parking spaces they want to add EV charging to, what kind of EV charging they want, how many chargers they want, and then they have a plan, and then they can come back to us and apply for a rebate for a portion of the cost. So it's typically somewhere between $45,000 and $55,000 for one multifamily property. And they can add either level 1 outlets, which is just like that wall outlet over there, which, believe it or not, you can charge your EV on that. Or it could be a level 2 charger, which is what you typically see in a retail or other area. And then a newer program that we launched last year targets low-income customers. We are providing a $2,000 EV rebate for them to buy an electric vehicle. Next slide. The vehicle can be used or new, and we support a variety of models. We worked really hard to make sure that this rebate was available at the dealership. So we didn't want the customer to worry about going into the dealership and then coming back and submitting all this paperwork to SVCE. Now, for most of the dealerships that are enrolled in our program, you can go and purchase the EV, and they will knock that $2,000 off your purchase price. But you could also do it as a post-purchase rebate. So if you purchase a vehicle outside our service territory, you can still leverage this rebate with some paperwork after the fact. Next slide. And then we are doing some EV education. This is very similar to what the city of Sunnyvale is already doing. There's some webinars, electric vehicle expos, ride and drive type events that we are doing. Actually, the city has been doing them for a longer time and has a very robust education focus as well. So we are continuing to do these as well, particularly in more of our underserved communities in Morgan Hill and Gilroy. And that's pretty much it. I'll touch on two things real quick on this last slide. That curve is not drawn to scale and has no numbers on it for a reason, but it was just meant to be illustrative. About 5 years ago, we were in the far left part of this curve. We were in an early adoption phase. We were testing out a lot of new technologies. Heat pumps were really not that common. People didn't know about them. We weren't sure if they provided the same kind of experience to customers as gas appliances. Now we're more in the middle part of that phase where we're fine tuning our programs, where customers are aware, but now we're just trying to get these appliances into customers' hands as quickly as we can. But really, where we need to get to is the far right. And in order to get there, we need both the carrots that SVC is providing as well as the sticks of policy and regulation. And our Bay Area is starting to move in that direction. As some of you may have heard, there are regional regulations that are pushing towards all electric appliances and getting rid of gas appliances. There are local policies. City of Sunnyvale is planning to adopt some ordinances for building electrification. Other agencies are also doing similar things. So there is a movement in that direction. We may face some setbacks, in the current climate, but I think we're all pushing towards that goal. So I think that's the hope I'm going to leave you with, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you. So the question was, am I am I talking about tariffs? To a certain extent, it's unclear how much those tariffs are going to affect something like electric vehicle infrastructure or the cost of appliances themselves. I think that might be a little bit delayed before we start seeing that. We do have our own funding, as I said, and so one option is we can also just increase the value of the rebates that we're offering so that customer gets more if the appliances become more expensive, but then that also means we serve fewer people. So, yeah.
I've got two questions. One is around electrification of buildings, and you mentioned that a panel upgrade is going to be up to 7,000, but it's actually you have to run a new PG&E line that can be up to 20,000. I have a neighbor that's like he can't do it, but the 100 amps you can do it. But so what options do you have to keep it within the 100 amp budget?
So there are pausers and splitters. There are devices that you can get that you can integrate into your electrical panel or into your circuit that will make sure that one appliance turns off when another appliance is being used. For example, maybe you get home in the evening in your electric vehicle, you plug in your car. You probably don't want to charge your EV at 5 p.m. because the PG&E rates are really expensive at that time. But you need to cook dinner, and so you turn on your induction cooktop. You could do a circuit share between your induction cooktop and your EV, and use your induction cooktop, and then when you're done with dinner, late at night, your car is going to be charging when your induction cooktop isn't going to be on anyway. So typically the amperage listed on appliances is the maximum amperage, and so I'm getting very geeky here, but my point is it is doable with different devices, and we have seen customers be reasonably successful doing that.
And the second question, EV rebate. Can I go into my bike shop and get it credited for my EV?
No.
Electric, but why not? It's an electric vehicle.
Oh, we are contemplating, we actually have funding for an e-bike rebate.
But I mean, it's an e-bike,
yeah. Okay,
EV.
no, I thought you were trying to get your EV rebate at your e-bike
No.
shop. So we do have an e-bike program that we have funding for, but we haven't yet launched. And so we are still formulating how we are going to run that program. I know the city of Mountain View offered that last year or last couple of years. So we're thinking about modeling it along those lines, or some of the other CCAs have done that as well.
Plinson Clean Energy did it, and they were like sold out within a day. It was like really quick.
Yeah.
So they're very, very popular. But I'm curious, about tracking them, because some people could be buying an electric bike, they're not using it, which would be a travesty. But I hope there actually is some incentive to show that you're actually using it.
Yeah. There's another CCA that actually is targeting commutes specifically on electric bikes, and so they are threading the rebate through the employer. So you get your e-bike rebate through your company if you demonstrate that you are biking to work. Just another way to do it.
Anyone else?
actually had a question about the EV rebates again. We actually bought a Tesla last year, and they did the federal rebates fine, but I didn't know about this $2,000 rebate. Is it possible to integrate that with the dealers so that they just offer that upfront?
Yeah, so the rebate is integrated with the dealer. Our program did just launch in October of last year. I don't know when your purchase was. And our program is income qualified. So you have to qualify as low income, which is making less than 80% of whatever the area's income is, which is typically, I think it's, I want to say it is $120,000. Other questions?
I have a question. Is it possible to completely get rid of the PG&E bill that I have and just use all SVCE?
So that's a great question. The way SVCE works is that it's you could think of it as a partnership with PG&E because SVCE is just buying the clean electricity where it's generated, and then it gets transmitted over PG&E's distribution lines to a customer. So on your electricity bill, you're seeing two charges. One is from SVCE for the purchase of clean electricity, and one is from PG&E for transmission and distribution. And if you look at those two charges whenever you get a chance, you'll see that the T&D charge, transmission distribution charge from PG&E is the bulk of the total cost that you're paying. So unfortunately, unless SVCE purchased the transmission and distribution, the grid system, which we don't have any plans to do, we wouldn't be able to get rid of that charge altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that reminded me. I have another question about the transmission capacity. So earlier, there was the target that Sunnyvale had to get like 40% of the vehicles converted to EV by whenever the date was. Does the transmission capacity exist to support that, or is there work that would need to be done to achieve those targets?
So there are concerns about grid capacity to be able to handle vehicle load. And I think that's where what Tim was asking about, which is managing your load, becomes important. There also may need to be like a staggering of when people charge their EVs. So if literally everyone in Sunnyvale had an electric vehicle, you wouldn't want everybody to be charging between midnight and 6 a.m., which is when most people charge. So you might have to stagger so you're not overloading the grid. And so there are concerns about whether the grid can handle it. I think in this moment, if everyone went electric, the answer is no. But the regulatory agencies are building that capacity over time.
Yeah, related to that, what about batteries? Do you have any battery programs? That way you could sort of offload the grid sort of automatically.
Yeah, so one of the programs I talked about tonight, which was our financing program, the zero interest financing, will provide heat pumps, but it will also provide solar plus battery with that financing piece. And it might be a limited number of customers again, because you have to hit the qualifications for that program. Right now, that's the only one we have for residential customers. In the future, we may consider a battery program for residential.
And regarding charging, I noticed that the peak rates are now just in the evening. So charging in the morning or during the middle of the day actually is great because we got a lot of solar power. So it's a great time to charge.
It's a cleaner time. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, just a question about commercial and business power use. And are there programs that are targeting that sector, or is it only residential?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We don't often think about the commercial sector, but especially Sunnyvale does have a lot of commercial space. And we do have programs, I didn't cover them tonight. We do have programs for decarbonization. We have one program that almost provides like a concierge service. So for a select number of companies, maybe it's only like, it's under 10, we are walking through all of their facilities with them to figure out where there are opportunities to decarbonize. Some of these have industrial processes. So when we think of commercial, we just think of, oh, there's lighting and HVAC, but there's some research facilities. They have refrigeration, they have labs, things like that. So kind of helping them figure out how to decarbonize with whatever technologies exist. We also have a business rebate program that's very similar to our home rebate program. Yeah, I think that's the gist of it. But yeah, we're also, I'll say we're also working with some of our larger customers. A lot of the big corporations around here have climate action goals and sustainability plans, environmental social responsibility plans. And so we are in conversations with them about how to keep their electricity clean. And work and use SVC's electricity basically. So yeah.
So I had a question about what you referred to as both on-bill financing and zero interest financing. So you said that it's launching later this month. How long is that pilot going to run? I'm curious, when you'll be stopping to assess how it works, and then, if there's any sense of when that might be rolled out more generally.
So the pilot should launch end of May, and we want to have, it's pretty ambitious, but we want to have the 200 customers in the pilot or have their installations done by the fall. And then we will have a year of post-installation data. So we'll wait until fall of 2026 to measure energy use after installation at those customers' home. And then we would have evaluation data in 2027, early 2027. So that's when we would get the program evaluation data. So unfortunately, it just takes time, but you want to do 12 months of post-installation assessment because you want to understand seasonal changes and compare it to the pre-installation data.
Thank you. Yeah, so we installed a heat pump water heater just half a year ago. Actually, no, last June, about 3/4 of a year ago. And immediately upon installation, there was this burnt PCB smell, burnt circuit smell. And and there was corrosion in there already, even though it was supposed to be new. And then just last week, it stopped working. And then it came back by itself, but it wasn't working before. So I think we had a bad heat pump water heater. The brand is A.O. Smith, which is a well-known brand. That although it's under warranty, effectively it's really expensive to replace it because the installation is not under warranty. And so you have to pay like another $1,000 to get a replacement. So that's a difficulty, I think, financially for people. The warranty doesn't really is really ineffective in this situation.
Yeah. So really sorry to hear that. But I will also share your pain because we put in a heat pump HVAC system and struggled for a year with it. Every time the temperature dropped below 40 degrees outside, the heat pump would shut down. And my in-laws were visiting from India and they're like, we're going back. It's too cold here. So, but we also ended up, it was a lemon. So we ended up having to replace the outdoor unit of our HVAC, and now it is functioning okay.
And then you had to pay like $1,000.
And in our case, our contractor just did it for free.
That's really nice.
So we got lucky. But I wanted to tell you that two of the programs I talked about tonight, the zero interest financing and our direct install program where you use SVCE contractors, the labor warranty is covered for 1 year.
Oh.
Yes.
Well,
so if you used our program,
we did get a SVCE rebate.
you got a rebate, but now we have our own contractors that do it.
Oh,
and so now
that must have been after we
yes,
did
this
it.
program is brand new.
Oh, that's
it just
good.
launched a few months ago.
Okay, that's good to
Yeah.
know about that
Yeah,
program.
so we tried to include that because we recognize that could happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was on the opposite side. I had one of the first heat pump water heaters put in. It's worked perfectly. I have two HVAC systems. They work perfectly because for some unknown reason my house had two furnaces. Then I had an induction. That thing broke on 360 days. So I got a new panel, something or other, and I also bought the cheapest induction. But one issue that nobody ever brings up, I drive a car that we bought in 2019 or something like that. I don't go anywhere. It's got 30,000 miles on it. If I got rid of that and got an EV, it'd still be on the road because gas cars now can go 200,000 miles. And we've given away two cars. One of them, I heard the transmission finally blew, but this flaky gal who has it, she probably didn't take care of it. It's in LA. But knowing her, but anyway, but then my granddaughter has another, Honda CRV. It's probably got 130,000, 140,000. She just drives back and forth to work in LA. So there's that whole issue about we got to be all EV by 2040. It's not going to happen because these gas cars, and who's going to, remember the years ago there was dollars for clunkers? Remember that?
Cash for clunkers.
Cash for clunkers.
Yeah.
I mean, does somebody want to take my car and give me, 50 or 60? How much would it be? About 50. I could probably sell that thing for $35,000 or $40,000. Well, I'm not going to, obviously, but
Yeah, I think there
but
is a
that's
state
just, to me,
program.
that's such an issue that sort of nobody thinks about.
Yeah.
About these cars that can go on forever now.
Yeah.
On that very negative note, sorry. Negative. But on the other hand, all my electric stuff works. I can't put solar because of the roof that I have. So my electric bill is really high in the winter, 550, 580. But in the summer, it's sitting around $100. And my gas bill is about $4.50 because I do have a gas dryer, but I don't run it because I hang my clothes. So it's just, I think that gratis, I have to pay for gas. Gratis.
It's $0, practically zero. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, mine's actually negative. I get $300 back every year.
So
Yeah, actually, we're really happy. We actually did it in 2019. So when the pandemic hit and we had all those fires, we were happy to have the cool, clean air inside, keep our windows closed all the time. There is a state possible bill that wants to revoke the solar net metering that people have. Does SVCE have any thoughts on that?
yes, so I'm not not the most knowledgeable person about legislation, but we actually have an entire person dedicated. Oh, sorry, I just wanted to look at Tim. We have an entire person that focuses on legislative advocacy. And then we have a team of folks that work on regulatory compliance and trying to advocate for better regulations that support clean electricity as well. So we are very likely advocating on that bill, but I don't know the details.
I just want to quickly channel my friend Rich, who I know has talked to you about this, but he will point out that we have a ton of batteries out there in our EVs. And if we had two-way chargers, that we could, for example, power our house and our induction cooktop in the high rate period. And then when the rates go down, go back to charging your car overnight. So I know he's moving to actually get that done in Sunnyvale. And so he's sort of pushing the permit process and everything to make that possible. But that's certainly something we can do because those are huge batteries, and we already have them. So
Yeah, he did mention that at the commission meeting. And I think that the regulation has to evolve on that front. So there is bidirectional charging that's allowed, but it's in like limited situations. And so that is another area that we are advocating for better technology and better regulations to support.
One more, hopefully quick question. Speaking of the permitting, if you want to actually replace your water heater or the heat up your furnace, what types of permits do you need to get in? Does Sunnyvale have expedited ways to get those? Just the permits aren't always the easiest to get.
Yeah, so it depends on the city. So some cities will require you to pull two different permits, one electrical, one plumbing, and some cities have one for putting in a water heater. Some cities like Sunnyvale have everything electronic, and some cities don't. So every city is a little bit different, and SVC actually has $4 million in a program that we are specifically working with our 13 agencies to say, hey, what do you need to make permitting go faster? And so it's going to be a different solution for every city because there are differences and the prices vary quite a bit as well. So it could be a permitting solution, could be anything like a free permit if you're going from gas to heat pump water heater, or a discounted permit if you're doing that, or skipping an inspection. Maybe you don't need an inspection, which means the installation happens faster. So things like that. We're just exploring ideas that the cities are interested in. We don't really have any concrete direction, but different cities have different interests in that area. And so by the end of the year, we might have some permitting specific improvements that we will be working with each city on.
Thank you. This was very good. And it was good to end on a better note and then some programs and some sort of free stuff coming. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. And we're going to move right on to Jack Negley, who is our resilience librarian, which I believe is the only one in the state. And Jack, are you the only one in the country?
Hi everybody. I'm the only one in the state. I don't believe I'm the only one in the country, and the explicit title is actually Sustainability Librarian. No worries. Working a lot in promoting resiliency, but yes, the title is a Sustainability Librarian indeed. Yeah, so I'm here tonight. Thank you so much for having me first. I'm here just basically to introduce myself and talk hyper briefly, just to let you guys know that I exist and I'm a vehicle for all of you to support your goals and what you're up to. And I very much want the library to be a space to promote everything and anything you guys are up to. I'm only a little bit intimidated to follow all these expertly detailed presentations. I don't have a formal slide deck for you all, but there's a couple of things that I'd like for you to know about what's going on here at the library and about myself, just so we can kind of go from there, if that makes any sense. So frankly, it was pretty apt to have Madeline on the call. My role, and I have not actually been here for 5 months yet, but my role was created or birthed by Sunnyvale's Environmental Services Department. So it's grant funded, it's term limited, and a large part of what I do is to support ESD's work through the lens of the library. So to be just a bit more specific, the elevator pitch that I've been giving everyone is, in essence, the role of the sustainability librarian is to make the community increasingly self-reliant, so resiliency there, and provide patrons with action-based solutions as a means to live more ethically, equitably, and just live more sustainable lives. So demystifying the monolith that climate change seems so often to be through these aforementioned small everyday actions. So my goal every day when I come in is, ask myself, how do we empower the community to act as opposed to maybe, bombarding them or scaring them. Although, it can be scary, but, trying to navigate those waters is essentially what my priorities lie. I do think it's important to discuss a little bit about my background before I discuss what I've been up to in the first 5 months that I'm here and what we have moving forward. And I'm telling myself a little bit, it's a bit embarrassing, but I actually do not have a background in sustainability. So this evening, I've honestly learned quite a bit, which is great. I'll take that to what I do tomorrow and moving forward. But my background is purely in library science and archives. So when I was offered this position and I accepted it, the dynamic between what I knew and what my colleagues knew and what I'd have to learn, that gap was maybe a bit intimidating. But I found coming into it and working every day is that I do share a perspective, or maybe an amateur or a layman perspective, so to speak, that I think enabled me to put myself in the shoes of the average library patron and really advocate for that point of view, if that makes every sense. So as I'm trying to educate the community and our patrons here at the library, I'm also very much learning. And so everyone that I've spoken to and reached out to, including you all at Livable Sunnyvale, has come from a true sense of earnest curiosity. I really want to ingratiate myself to Sunnyvale and make sure I'm doing right by everyone who's there. So I'm very much learning on the job a bit. I'm growing as a librarian, obviously, and all the traditional duties that involves. But I'm gradually learning about the interconnectedness and the intersectionality of that umbrella term, sustainability. Certainly an ongoing process, but like I said, Madeline and the rest of the team at ESD have been very generous in lending their expertise to every silly question I may have about the job. And then just stepping ahead a little bit, what we have going on at the library and what I've been up to. Much of my efforts over the last few months have been focusing on reaching out to local stakeholders who have been working in sustainability education, while also familiarizing myself with the city's own sustainability goals, which I often refer to the Climate Action Playbook, which again was referenced tonight, which I'm glad was in much detail. So again, without like a significant background in this field, all of my communication stems, from that earnest curiosity. But I would say most of the programs, for example, that I've been putting on at the library have used the Climate Action Playbook in the plays that we mentioned earlier, promoting clean electricity, sustainability, or sustainably managing resources, and learning to adapt to climate change. Those are all key sentiments in every program that I'm trying to organize here at the library. So just a couple brief and kind of key examples. In promoting clean electricity, we have the Electrify Your Life series, in which we invite speakers to help residents learn what's the best route to electrifying their homes. So some of the rebates and incentives that we just heard about from SBCE, we've had some of their representatives come and speak at the library and speak to our patrons about what is best specifically for them. So that's an ongoing series that we have. And then it could be as everyday or mundane as sustainable crafting programs or composting workshops or cooking demos with the induction cooktops that we have, which are provided by ESD. Wellness classes, author talks that are pertinent to these discussions, and nature and cleanup excursions. So these are all programs that I'm trying to organize here at the library, and several are coming up. I recommend you check out the calendar. Got some good stuff coming up as well. And then perhaps a bit more tangibly, I'm also helping to lead and develop our Library of Things collection here at the library. So if you're not aware of what that is, the Library of Things is a non-traditional collection of items, so beyond books and DVD media or audiobooks, that we circulate as a means to not only limit commercial consumption, but again, to promote this idea of community and self-reliance and that idea of sustainability at large. So a lot of these items in this collection are things you may really only need once or on occasion. And so to buy them or to purchase them would be a waste. It would be a waste of money. It would be literally creating waste, because whatever you buy, if you're only using it once, is likely going to end up in the landfill anyway. And these items really do promote the idea of experimentation as well, like lifting that monetary barrier to learning new skills. So these items range from kitchen and cooking items, outdoor gardening, home improvement, electronics. We want people to feel empowered to try new things without, again, that monetary barrier. We want them to grow. and think of the library as more of a, or less of a static, repository of books and more of a community space. More specifically, just a couple of these items, we have sewing machines, weed whackers, toolkits. And then I think Madeline's not here anymore, but I know she'd want me to promote the induction cooktops that we have that circulate. We have the cool cooktop program. We're constantly trying to create programming around those so people are encouraged to try that out for the first time. So before you get that rebate to really install it in your home, like that may cost a lot of money, try it out here at the library first. That is the kind of essence of the Library of Things program. And then quickly, I'll wrap up just a long-term goal that we have that I've been working on since I came here and will be doing into the distant future. The library and several other community spaces in Sunnyvale, we're trying to create a resiliency network, essentially. So making or designating the library as a resiliency hub. So the library, currently act as a cooling and heating center, but moving forward, we're trying to focus more on disaster preparedness, emergency communication, and then as well as what I've been referencing as climate action education. So we're in the very early stages of this plan. I know I spoke to Angela very briefly about how we're applying for a grant with Greenbelt Alliance to help us navigate the education side of that, to educate the public about what are resiliency hubs and how we can engage them for their feedback. But when we are to really start that in earnest, we'd likely have, like I said, resiliency workshops with the public, assessing what other community organizations are up to in the zone, such as Livable Sunnyvale, and co-design what this hub needs to be for the people that actually live here. There's no resiliency hub can be created in a vacuum, essentially, which I'm sure you all know in depth. So yeah, and that is essentially the short and long of it. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know I didn't have a formal presentation, but yeah, if you guys had any quick questions, I know that I might have to dip out a bit early because I have to close up the library. So yes, if you had any questions off the bat, please, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Jack. I just have an EV vehicle. Can we get that at the Library of Things?
Not quite yet, but
Or an EV bike.
or an EV bike. That's, what we are, and again, what's it called? ESD is acquiring a new grant, so we are introducing new solar items into the Library of Things. So solar generators, solar panels, and portable solar panels. So a lot of those things are trying to promote clean electricity and decarbonization. Those are coming into the collection. So an EV bike, maybe down the road, and also for the EV car, maybe not. But we do have the EV ride and drive coming up soon at the library, so keep a lookout for that if you're interested in trying that out. Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you, Jack, because I saw you come early too, and this has been a long night. So thank you. I appreciate your time and good luck.
Thank you very much.
We're going to move on to tonight. We have board elections. So I'm going to let Chuck take over for that piece. And then after the elections, we'll talk about our next meeting. And thank you all for being here. I'm actually going to dip out. My daughter is going back to Boston tonight, so I'm going to go take her to the airport and shed a couple tears. So thank you.
All right. So tonight, the last thing on our agenda is elections for the Livable Sunnyvale board. So currently we have 6 seats that are open on our board. There are 3 seats that were elected last year. We elect kind of half one year and then half the next year. And so currently tonight we have 6 seats open. So far, there have been 4 candidates that have been nominated: Pauline Zapata, Agnes Veith, Doug Kuntz, and Angus Liu. And so I wanted to start to see if there are any other nominations or anyone else who would be interested in running for the board. The requirements to run for the board, you have to be a member in good standing, which I believe you have to have attended 2 meetings over the past 6 months. Is the current requirement. So first wanted to open it up and see if there's any nominations or anybody that is interested in running for the board other than the people I've already mentioned. Check the chat. All right, good. So then kind of the mechanics of the election. So I'm going to post a Google form in the chat in just a minute. So we'll open up the Google form and collect responses for probably 5 or 10 minutes. We'll have a time cutoff to give everyone a chance to look at those and consider the options. I have a list of the if you are eligible to vote, you should have received an email from Paulina over the last week or so. Again, the eligibility criteria for voting are the same. It's attending 2 meetings over the past 6 months. So if you are an eligible member, you would have received an email over the past couple of months. And I've got a list here too, if you have any questions. I've got the list of people that are eligible. So I'll go ahead and post this link in the chat. So yeah, it's just a simple Google form. You have to actually fill out your name first, just so we can verify kind of who's submitting the form, that they're one of the eligible voters, and we'll kind of do that independently, and then we'll tabulate the results. And let's say, oh, sorry, is there a question? Yeah, you can do it on your phones, or if you want to use my laptop. We actually don't have paper forms. I should have thought about that for the in-person things. We don't have paper forms, unfortunately. But if you need to use somebody's phone or somebody's laptop, um, you can use my laptop, or we've got a couple of others around that you could use. Oh, I posted it in the. Did people get it in the chat? Oh, I'm sorry. I sent it to Livable Sunnyvale. Sorry, that's not very useful. Did it just show up in the chat for everyone? All right. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and let's say 8:55. We'll give people several minutes to vote, and then come back at 8:55 and tabulate the results.
So what we do first is we elect the board, and then as a board, what we do is we elect who's going to serve in what positions. No. You elect someone to sit on the board, and then the board themselves decides on who's going to be president and vice president.
Yeah, actually, yeah, there's a question kind of just in the room about kind of the board chair and all the other officers of the board. So the way that works is all the members elect the board, and kind of at our next board meeting, which will be next week, the board will appoint all of the officers for the following year. Secretary, treasurer, chairperson. There might be one other officer or something like that.
You want to drop the mic, huh? to vote, Margaret, should be in the chat. Or just tell Mike who you're gonna vote for and he'll put a tally mark. That would be good. We are a nonprofit, we do follow the rules, but sometimes it's just easier to say, okay, put a hash mark by somebody's name. No, Margaret, you don't have to vote for me. You could say no if you want. I know you know I'm professional. I have two, and I'm exhausted right now. I started out today, some of us came here and volunteered to do baths, and you know that's really arduous. I don't want to see carrot again for a very long time. I was like carrot control. I was carrot control. I was putting carrots in the bath. It's like, I'm not going to eat a carrot for a little bit of time, I think. Yeah. In fact, 1,450 baths between 8 o'clock, I think, and 11. There were 5 carrots in the bath. We had bok choy. We had red onion. We had oranges, some of which were blood red oranges. Apples, green peppers, lemons, and finally we were able to get eggs. So the Church of Latter-day Saints donated a boatload of eggs. Yeah. Yeah, so that was really, really cool because you probably heard this, food banks are not getting the amount of food they've gotten before. Yeah, so it's a real problem for people that are trying to distribute food, especially protein. Protein is extremely difficult to come by. And there's more and more, the need is rising, but yet the amount of food that is available to just give to people is decreasing. The need has been rising. I mean, it's very expensive to live here. People would rather put their money in their housing and stay housed sometimes than to buy food. So a number of people in our community are what's called housing burden, which means they pay more than 30% of their income for their housing. So it's a real problem. It's a real problem. And housing is so expensive, and the wages for many people aren't that high. The average wage in Sunnyvale is very high, but that doesn't mean, I mean, we all just average. Yeah, so it's hard. Yeah, they went away from some of the other protein that they were.
All right, so just one quick last call for anyone that wants to vote. We're actually going to go count up the results, and we will tabulate those and be back in probably just about 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah, do you want me to talk about the next meeting?
And while you're waiting, Agnes was going to talk about our next meeting that's going to be coming up in what's next month? June, May, June.
Okay, so Mike and I are coordinating the next meeting, and the meeting will be on June 4th. And finally, the city is going to put together its village center master plan. I know you can do that like a million times. We've been following this plan literally for years, 3 years, 4 years. It's been a long time. Yes, Charlene. Okay, so Charlene's asking, and I don't want to get up and walk all over there with the mic, but it's going to come before the Planning Commission on the 12th of May. And then in June, it's going to be going before council. So you could speak in either forum and give your input to that. So what we want to do at our meeting in June is we have invited Sean Mendron, who oversees the Village Center plan. And so he'll be talking to us. Chuck is going to show some of his slides that he put together about North Sunnyvale and some of the problems with Dwayne and Lakeview and the food desert that will be created. So that's what we're planning on doing in June. And it's been a long time in coming, a very long time. So if you come and you speak, make sure that you also, you can ask whatever you want, but there are state laws that have been implemented that makes it somewhat difficult to do what we want to do in Sunnyvale. So think about asking those kinds of questions too. So, okay, any questions about our meeting in June? And it will be hybrid, so you can come here to Sunnyvale Community Services or you can come on Zoom. Okay, that's it.
The master plan is coming to the Planning Commission, and did you already say this in mid-June? Okay. No, May 12th is the Lakewood project, the Lakewood Shopping Center project. But the master plan, is mid-June, coming to the Planning Commission, and I believe it's July 1st coming to the City Council. I don't think so, because they were already submitted. Or the Fair Oaks Plaza, the Fair Oaks Shopping Center. They're already submitted. That's right. That's why we've been asking for a long time to get that master plan done.
My apologies, I sure messed up all the dates. Other than the dates, I did fine. Yeah.
All right, so we've looked at all the results, and I want to congratulate all 4 candidates, Paulina, Agnes, Doug, and Angus. They were all elected to the board, so congratulations. Yeah, and our next first board meeting will be next Wednesday. For all the new members, we'll be sending out some emails with information about that, accounts and stuff like that. So congratulations, everybody. And that wraps it up. That's all we have for tonight. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see everyone in June. Good night.